the new album, Weapons of Tomorrow, is out in a few weeks. Well, probably about 4 weeks now, I think, maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah, about 3.
Cool, man. This is the first album in 3 years. Obviously, you've changed bassist in that time. How's Chase fitting in so far?
It's been a fantastic change. Fortunately, we kept the lineup and the core songwriting elements of the lineup unchanged between the records. So in a band that's historically been very unstable in its lineup, it's a hard touring, hard grinding band. It's taken its toll on members. We've managed to be the most stable we've ever been. So I'd like to emphasize that. Chase Bryant is a great switch. It was a real smooth transition. And he's a technically superior player to anybody we've had in the group before. He's got a real like prog tech edge to his playing. And that's something a little different. We had that on the drum department on Waking into Nightmare with Nick Ritter. He was a similar musician background, and we have it on the bass here, the other rhythm section instrument, and you'll see that kind of influence show on stuff like Heart of Darkness, Notre Dame King of Fools, which has a fretless bass throughout. Only time we've done that on a Warbringer record. It gives it a unique and cool sound, and some of the runs on Outer Reaches and stuff where he gets to stretch his legs and shred. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I was not long listening to The Black Hand Reaches Out, which is a really, really cool song, man. That's probably up there with the best Warbringer songs, in my opinion.
Well, thank you.
And I've not even heard the whole album yet, so...
Well, we're really proud of this record. We're really proud of the songs we've been putting out, and I think that the band's never been stronger. As an individual artist and musician myself, I would hate a sense of decline in the quality of our own works. So we kind of up the pressure on ourselves every single time we put an album out to beat the last one. And I think over time, that sort of relentless drive and hunger has brought us to where we are. And I think the band's writing better songs now and does what it did on day one better than ever before. So I'm really proud of that the band's been growing stronger, not weaker over time, and that our best work is in the present or future, not the past 6 albums in.
Yeah. I mean, it's let's say Black Hand Reaches Out is a very, very catchy song. It's the way that a lot of the best, especially thrash songs are written, like songs like Toxic Waltz, for example. You remember them because they're catchy, and I think this one's going to really stick out and be a real staple Warbringer shows for a long time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we wrote it with that in mind too. You cited Toxic Waltz, where when we write a thrash mid pacer, that one, People the Lie, other songs like that are very much in the realm of what we're thinking. These kind of mid-pace, these sort of mid-tempo thrash numbers that you're talking about tend to be really catchy. And I think that most great thrash albums have one of these in there where you can pretty much use a hard rock song structure with really, really crunchy guitars and make a catchy, fun song that way. So on the last record, we had Remain Violent kind of filling that. On this one, we have The Black Hand Reaches Out, and we also have Power Unsurpassed, which is kind of in a similar tempo range. So we have a mixture of songs, though. We have the really accessible, straight ahead, not, tap your toe and bang your head and kind of want, because it's got that kind of mid easy, it's sort of like an easier tempo to go with than some of the really neck breaking stuff. And I think the contrast between these type of songs really helps them all stand out. Helps the proggy epic ones feel longer and more journey-like, and it helps the catchy, accessible ones really grab you and pull you into the record. So we try to write songs from a variety of angles, and Black Hand, indeed, all the things you said you liked about it, that was very much the hope that you would say those things, basically. So mission, catchy, accessible, fun to listen to, just enjoyable, but still heavy, still aggressive, Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I like that song so much. I was almost hoping this interview would get delayed so I could listen to it a few times more.
Well, fear not. You can do it. You can do it after if you want.
And how would you compare Weapons of Tomorrow to Woe to the Vanquished?
A continuation and the next step. That's how I would compare it.
Okay.
I think
Cool.
that fundamentally, we didn't fundamentally change the band's sound after Woe to the Vanquished. Rather, we felt that we had finally sort of found the ideal Warbringer sound after, on the 5th album in our career. So because of that, we didn't want to go back to the drawing board and make a new thing. We wanted to develop this vision of the band that we'd created through that 5th record. And so I think the real change was the real challenge, I think, was just maintaining that level of refinement and diversity in the album, have the album be a journey like the last one, and keep the really, what we consider to be a really high songwriting standard where each song gets its own idea. There are no fillers, that kind of aesthetic. Those were all the things we were trying to carry forward from the last record. And I think what we did differently is some of the melodic, progressive, and epic stuff that was really concentrated in the B side of Woe to the Vanquished now has spilled over to the A side and is more evenly spaced throughout the record. So Woe to the Vanquished was really side A was smashing and thrashing, and side B opened up and became epic and melodic and all this stuff. And Weapons of Tomorrow, I think, blends the two together more throughout the record.
Nice. Something else really, really cool about the album is the artwork, which is another Andreas Marschall piece.
I fucking love that guy's work. That's why we've done him 2 records in a row now.
Yeah. I mean, he's got one of the most impressive CVs in the history of cover artists.
Absolutely. A lot of albums I really love. A couple come to mind immediately are Agent Orange by Sodom and Nightfall in Middle Earth by Blind Guardian. Both really great albums and album covers. There's many more. One thing that's cool, I was just talking about how Weapons is a continuation on Woe. The cover, you'll see this too. So the same artist did, Andreas Marschall did both covers, and the first one, I handed him a photo, actually, the helmet pyramid on Woe to the Vanquished, the pyramid of 20,000 of those spiky World War I Prussian helmets, those ones.
Yeah.
It was a real thing that existed, and I'm like, well, that's basically an implied pile of skulls. And so that's how that ended up being the Woe to the Vanquished cover. And he painted that with a different background. All the people that were in the photo are gone and replaced with cold, just a line of cannons and shit. Yeah. This new one is, you'll notice that the kind of red and copper color scheme from the last album cover is sort of in the background. Because Woe to the Vanquished, that era, we sort of set the time period of that cover in like the World War I era. I said a lot of stuff there. And so we use that color scheme to kind of represent that in the new cover, where I think the implication we wanted is sort of the weapons of tomorrow are like emerging from the past of the 20th century industrial wars. We built this military, industrial, geopolitical system, and now we continue to harvest the benefits, if you want to be sarcastic about it. So that's kind of the point we wanted to make with the cover, and I think he does a great job of bringing that theme out. Something that was Andreas's own addition there is that guy in the middle holding his hand out, the faceless drone face guy who's saying, like, join us, there is actually, he got it from, there's a piece of World War II Italian fascist propaganda. A guy called Gino Boccacil drew this Italian-German friendship poster that was, during World War II. So we're talking the fascists and the Nazis here. Yeah. Where it shows a Wehrmacht soldier holding his hand out to the viewer, just like the guy on our cover, and he's smiling, and that's the part that's creepy, like, join us, where it's like evil making the angry face at you is one thing, but it's like even scarier when it's smiling at you, So that's the thing. That's the thing I kind of gravitated towards on that, and he pretty much took that exact same pose and put it for this instead of for a World War II Wehrmacht soldier saying, join us in our evil cause, where instead it's like this kind of faceless ambassador of the future, join us in our technological inhuman future. That's kind of what I get from it.
That's awesome. That's a really interesting background to that.
Yeah, we try to draw on stuff and have real ideas. I already did a record when I was 19 where I'm like, yeah, it's about random violence, So I want to develop. I want to keep the band interesting, and I want everything that's there to be something you can really sink your teeth into, and you can see layers of depth and artistry at every stage of the creation of this record. That's been part of our goal for the last one and for this one, is to be kind of the thrash band with the most content offer, I guess, in terms of what our songs actually have baked into them.
But that's a great way to approach it. I mean, it's like if you make a film, the story's only part of it, the visuals are another part, and the subtext and this kind of that. So altogether, it makes for a great album.
Yeah, exactly. We want to be firing on every cylinder. What we really want to do is to make something that we would consider to be a latter-day classic of heavy metal. We really love some of those great classic genre-defining albums, and we feel that, at least in the sense of like traditional leading metal styles, that they're a little slimmer pickings for real like landmark albums than you'd like. And there's a lot of understandable reasons for this. Proliferation of tons and tons of music, and just the fact that heavy metal's a 30, 40-year-old genre that has been heavily explored. So those things make it tougher. But we're still going to take our best shot. We want to make something that you could put up next to your favorite albums in any genre and be like, this holds up the level of quality, depth, songwriting, execution, artwork, musicianship, lyrics, you name it. It all holds up, and it's all written from a very true, honest place that and has a ton of thought behind it, and thought, a ton of thought and a ton of raw passion. We aim to fire on all cylinders.
Yeah. Sweet. Obviously, promotion for the album has been hindered for obvious reasons.
Yep.
So, of course, you're doing interviews today. I'm sure you'll be doing some more throughout the weekend or next week.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any kind of ideas in mind on how to keep the album in the public consciousness, if you will, despite being unable to tour right now?
Well, the number one idea is that we wrote the album to be really freaking good, and that the quality of the music will keep it in the public consciousness. So that's the cornerstone of our strategy.
Yeah.
And I would say that if it isn't for someone, well, stop relying on gimmicks so much and focus more on the songs. I think that one thing Warbringer is, we're very reactionary against some of the very like image-focused gimmicks. We do all our songs about X subject, and we dress like this if you're at our concerts. All that we're not for it.
No.
But I'd say that, so basically we're gonna take a hit here. It's gonna happen. I didn't know when we set this release date months ago that there's gonna be a worldwide pandemic. I'll tell you what I've been saying to other people though. When I started playing the music we are, I knew it was an uphill battle. We all did. Right. We knew this isn't the music that is most marketable right now, or that the world wants to hear. It's the music that's in our hearts that we want to play. That's why we're here. So I've been fighting an uphill battle. I've been ready to bite the bullet my whole career. And so, we put out a record and it's coronavirus, and and it's going to be affecting all these ways. Whatever, yet one more challenge. Stack it on the mountain. It's been a fight. It's been a fight the whole way. So this is nothing different. We're gonna take a hit here, and it's yet another one. We've lost all these people on the way. We've had to change labels. I've had to rebuild the whole fucking band. This isn't as big of a deal as that, at least to Warbringer. So it's just another fight. And I'll keep doing it gladly as long as I love playing this music. It's
Yeah.
and not going to compromise or bend anything. As far as what we're putting out that can entertain people, well, the album, but we've got music videos. We have Black Hand. We have Firepower Kills release. We're putting out a third single, Glorious End, in about a week from today,
Oh,
and
cool.
we're also releasing a full documentary on all the all those layers I was talking about earlier. We
Yeah.
tried to create a documentary called The Science of Thrash. It's a sort of like an elaborate track by track of the record that
Yeah.
goes behind not just each song, but it attacks it from a instrumental, lyrical, and a songwriting process level, because we got the three main songwriters and we actually wrote the whole thing out so that who's talking kind of goes in the order of who had what idea when and how we actually pieced each song together.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that was kind of our answer for how do we do something that's entertaining but not
Yeah.
gimmicky at all. It's like, well, let's just dive into our process. Let's dive into the layers. Let's get into the detail.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned it as kind of being an uphill battle forever, not necessarily forever, but from the beginning for Warbringer. Because when Warbringer came out, there was kind of that thrash revival thing going on. And
Yeah.
almost immediately, at least over here, everyone was talking about Warbringer as like the leaders of the American side of it. That was the Warbringer was the band to go to. So
Well, that's good to hear.
yeah,
So, obviously it's not like we've pulled off a pushing 15-year career without any good fortune at all. So I don't want to seem like, I'm unthankful for what the band has achieved. I love doing this. So, let that be known. What I do, but even I'd say at the beginning, being part of that thrash revival was a very mixed blessing. Because on one hand, we came out, we're like these 19-year-olds at the time that are playing old school thrash metal, and that's very novel when no one's heard it for a while. And I think that novelty is we never saw it as novel ourselves. We were just like, we like thrash metal. There was no clever timing or anything from us. It was entirely incidental. That's when I graduated high school and started a band. And so pretty much that's how the timeline works out for me. I thought that one of the things that's been really hard for us, and I think it really took us and all the way till our fifth record to sort of get out of this, is that we were seen as a novelty act. That it was retro thrash. It was bringing back the 80s, paying tribute to the 80s. And I never wanted to pay tribute to anybody. I wouldn't put it. Do you know how much work it is to start a band and write a record? I wouldn't do that for somebody in tribute to somebody else. Blow me, I'm doing it for myself. Make no mistake. And so I always had a real chip on my shoulder about how no matter what we actually wrote for like 4 albums, no matter what our songs sounded like, we would just get the same comparisons and it would be the same story over and over of this band's like the 80s, but you might as well listen to the 80s is kind of the implication. And or it's just one of the sea of thrash revival bands. It's like they never point to the differences. They'd only point to the similarities. And you'd read a review of one of our records, and what you'd actually be reading is basically a list of thrash metal bands that played metal in the 80s. Because you couldn't get a description of anything that we did different, anything that sounded unique about us. And actually, this kind of anger over the way we're sort of written off in this creative aspect, when I think we had stuff that was out of the box starting on the first album, and by the second album, I think we're substantially out of the box for thrash metals, particularly with the way the rhythm section plays on that being very different from 80s thrash. So I always felt kind of slighted by that, and that's one of the big uphill battles I've been fighting, I guess, is just trying to get recognition as an actual individual songwriter and musician in that regard, and not as some cover tribute act. Victim to the whims of lazy journalists is how I see it. So the fourth album, that Empire's Collapse album, which is really weird, experimental, and all over the place, and the cover art looks nothing like anything else we had. that was kind of an overt fuck you to that. So in our mind, we were like, we're going to write a record that's so out of the box that if you say this is a Slayer tribute, you're just an idiot, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we did that. And actually, that record was pretty divisive when it came out. I don't think it was good for our career at the release, but I think we just had to do it because it was never our intent to be this nostalgia act or anything. To me, 80s thrash metal isn't nostalgia. I was a fucking kid. It's not about nostalgia at all. It's about music. I like this style of music. I like the way it makes me feel. Time is irrelevant. Only riffs matter. Is your song good? Well, great. It's good then. You know, that's how I see it. And I like the metal music of pretty much like starting at Black Sabbath's first album and going into the early 90s. I think that's like the definitive era of where you pretty much set up all the main subgenres of heavy metal, you know, it going into Black and Death and the extreme stuff too. I fuck with that. And so, you know, I think that for us, it was very much a battle to get just seen as our own band even. I feel like it took us 5 albums before the tone of sort of the scene and stuff goes from treating Warbringer and other bands of our generation as these sort of nostalgia acts and treating them as real bands instead, you know, because I think as our discography develops over time, the record eventually shows, oh, these guys have always been serious. These guys have always been solid. And I think that it kind of took for that thrash revival scene to sort of come and go and us to still be standing, like, you know, 8 years later or whatever, for people to see, oh, they were a little more than that. Okay. So everything's a mixed blessing.
Yeah, and you can tell that just like you say, if you're not being lazy and if you actually listen to Warbringer, there was, I don't want to name any names, but there were some bands that were just writing about 80s movies and things like this, and Warbringer wasn't doing that. Warbringer was making its own points and starting its own conversations. Yeah, so Warbringer, like you say, never was a nostalgia act, but so it's good, you know, you still got it.
I'm glad you see it that way, you know. And there's some who would disagree with me. That's their right and everything. But this is how I see my own work. I don't, you know, we're trying to forge our own path and make our own records that are worth listening to on their own merits. And I'm glad that it may have taken us a while, but I'm glad that the conversation's starting to change about the band, where it's seen less as this kind of novelty thing. I think because we were so young too. Because I think our first record was packaged as, here, you know, it's the rebirth of thrash. And what do we really have is a bunch of 19, 20-year-olds' first record ever. Yeah. So I think the way we are marketed coming out of the gate actually hurt us. And I wouldn't do it the same way again. Because I think basically that at the time, a brand new band couldn't live up to the claim it was being pushed for, like the rebirth of thrash. You know, thrash has some of the best, most revered albums in all of heavy metal. So it's a big claim, and we never said that about ourselves. That's something the label kind of and the press sort of stamped on us. We were just like, we like actual metal. At the time we were playing, we're like, why does everyone have a swoop haircut and go from breakdown to breakdown? Don't they know you have to play fast before you do the breakdown, or it doesn't mean anything? You know, yeah. Like, you so know, that we were a reaction to that. We were like, fuck that. That's not metal. We'll show you what metal means to us.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of what spurred the, if you will, thrash revival to begin with, is everyone was, yeah, like you say, you had all that kind of music and it was fucking boring.
Yeah.
So exactly like thrash in the 80s was a reaction against like hair metal, crew and rap and so forth. But this was, you know, again, like you say, it was, don't you know this music's supposed to be fun?
Yeah, it's funny. I write like we're of all the thrash revival bands, we're probably like the least tongue-in-cheek in our lyrics and stuff in general. But yeah, I firmly believe it's supposed to be fun. You know, I don't write. I think I have like one song in our discography that has any tongue-in-cheek at all.
Yeah.
You know, but which is Iron City from the 4th record, in case you're curious. But I think, you know, it's like 60 others, dead serious, steely eyes, you know, and That's all I've ever written. And you know, it's not that I'm against comical music, but I have a theory, which, you know, the 1 to 10 scale, right? The rating quality, 10 being the best, 1 the worst. So I think if you're writing a funny record, you can make a good record that way, but you're gonna top out at like an 8.5. If you write a serious record, you can make it all the way to 10. Doesn't mean you will, but that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying before about gimmicks or limiting yourself to one subject or one style.
I think there's been a lot of that in metal lately, where it's easier to go and say like, oh, it's like pirate metal or Viking metal, or, you know, something that, like, those things don't describe the music, you know. If someone calls Running Wild pirate metal, I'll get so pissed. That's a legit band. Come on, you know. So I think that stuff like that and those kind of marketing angles are not why I'm in metal.
No,
I think it's a legitimate artistic genre, and I don't like the let's play dress up and write, you know. And I would also just hate to have to write all my songs on one subject. People kind of sometimes mistakenly believe that Warbringer writes about war and that's our thing and that's what we do. And it's like, well, to be honest, between 30 and 40% of Warbringer songs. So it's like 1 in 3 ish. We have like big picture civilizational stuff. We have philosophical stuff. I do dark fantasy and sci-fi, and I go to some like interpersonal themes. All of that on this one record, you know. Some historical leanings, some thinking about the future. I'll take it wherever is interesting to me, and I guess the theme of warfare is like an anchor. And if you broaden what is warfare, you're talking about human disagreement, human conflict, human interests, and that's a way broad subject. So I find it pretty easy to keep finding stuff to write about. But I would hate it, even something as broad as warfare. I would hate it if I had to write every song about that. Not every musical piece we come up with sounds like, you know, it's suitable for imagery of tanks and guns and shit, for instance.
Yeah, but it's even like you were saying with the artwork there, it might have been inspired from a Wehrmacht Italian poster, but there's a much deeper subconscious and there's almost like a cult aspect to it in that regard. Because, you know, a cult doesn't recruit people with violence. It recruits people by pretending to be your friend and that sort of thing. So
one can even, if you talk about cults and stuff, then you can even get into some really dicey stuff that makes you rethink everything. Like, what is a nation? Why are you a part of it? You know, even something like the Pledge of Allegiance in the U.S. is seen. You know, but as a kid, I was like, "What's the big deal? It's fine." You know, and as an adult, I'm like, "Oh," or, you know, how there's we fly bombers and jets overhead and salute the armed forces during football games. It's not that the armed forces, the men and women of the armed forces, don't deserve your respect. They do. It's not that, but just the way that you do these like national type rallies. And as a guy who studies all the 20th century totalitarians, I'm interested in the question of evil. You know, I'd consider it to be evil for sure. But it's like I look at it, I'm like, man, we've got some kind of like light versions of some of the public ritual and ceremony that these kind of states would do, you know, to basically try to create public unity and this image of public consensus. If you have your population all in one place doing the same thing, saluting the same flag, doing stuff in unity, it creates this image of public consensus. And that's something that's very interesting about how society does, and how different societies in time have done that in different ways. And then it's weird when you apply that thinking to your own society that you live in every day and kind of go, ugh, put that in your pipe and smoke it, you know?
Yeah. Well, John, this has been really, really interesting, mate. I've probably taken up too much of your time already. So I'll say thank you very much.
I got to get to the next interview. Thank you very much, sir.
No worries, man. All the best with the album.
I appreciate it. And thanks a lot for the call. Thanks for having me on your show. check out Weapons of Tomorrow in 2020, and we hope you guys love the record. We did our damnedest to give you an uncompromising piece of heavy metal.
No doubt. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
No worries. Bye.